Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Sunday. Thank you for being here with me. And today is a significant day in a number of reasons. Number one, today is Easter. So happy Easter, everyone. I don't particularly have in this whole episode devoted to Easter and the esoteric meaning of Easter. I've covered that in previous live streams. But we will mention it in context of what we're talking about today, which is the idea of dis-ease and what that actually means. We had one broadcast on health, and this is the polar opposite of that, the yin-yang of that. And also, this is April 4th, 2021, and it was on April 5th, 2020 that I began these live streams. So we are that close to 1 year exactly of doing these broadcasts. That's 52 broadcasts. I haven't missed a single week, although I did have to shift some of these from Sunday to Monday whenever I do a workshop. There is another workshop coming up towards the end of this month, so we'll be back into that cycle again. We'll shift these off to Monday, but I will remind you about that next week. Meantime, right now, this is the address where you can find today's soundtrack, scientificsounds.com/dis-ease. And this is the address where you go to ask any question related to anything I've covered in these live streams and beyond. I will answer any question. It may not be the right answer, but it will sound good. And this one is my YouTube channel where you can see all the live streams I've done up to this point, all the way back to April 5th last year. And like I've said before, I started these live streams a month after the world closed down and the U.S. closed down because of the COVID pandemic. And I stepped forward as a expert in high-tech stress reduction because I recognized that stress is one of the factors that weakens the immune response, which is not something you want to have happening when you're in a pandemic. So I sort of stepped forward to do all of this. It was also a period of time when all of us began to look at ourselves and the world from a fresh standpoint. Many of us have been forced to reinvent our lives completely, me included. That was a period for me when I had to reinvent the concept of everything I do, because a large part of my task and my income has got to do with teaching practitioners my techniques with sound. People would fly in from all over the world, and I'd hold these workshops, these intensive workshops that lasted a week. And of course that was off the table, so I had to reinvent all that online. Now it is done, but for that first 3 months, my son Shay and I worked like fiends to try to solve many of the problems that are involved in how to put a real workshop online and make it work properly. And in the context of that, I decided to step forward in more ways than one. One was as a stress meister to guide people into helping to de-stress during these stressful times, to repair the autonomic nervous system in your stress response so that your immune system can be strengthened once again. But a deeper issue for me had to do with speaking up, stepping forward and speaking up, and telling your truth about yourself to the world, to step forward and in an unafraid way, to tell the world exactly what you think about everything. No holds barred. Many of us all the time are hiding our light, or pulling back from telling the real truth about what we believe about things and about what we believe to be so, because someplace deep down inside we think we might be wrong. And if you're wrong, then it's going to make you look bad. And nobody wants to look bad, because it's all got to do with this inner child thing we've got that we've been carrying around of what's the best way to be cool or to look good in the eyes of others. And that's a tragic way to live your life, because it leads you to this state of dis-ease that we're going to be talking about today. I'm not at ease with who I am. I'm not at ease with what I believe. I suspect that perhaps there's something wrong with me, or that I'm wrong, or and I don't want to be criticized because I'm taking it too hard or something. It's very complex, and it's deeply associated with speaking my truth. And when I can't speak my truth, and when I block that, I block my essential life energy. And my essential life energy, when it's blocked, causes me to enter into a state of dis-ease. Ease. Safe. I feel safe to say who I am, to speak my truth. And right up with that was a couple of things that I realized at the same time. Like, number one, the most successful people on earth are the ones who, no holds barred, tell who they are, tell the truth of themselves, let the world see, this is me. And it's going to be different than you. There's going to be a lot of things that are different, because this is me, and I'm unique. And everything about me is unique. The way I think, the way I feel, the way I look upon the world, all of these things are unique. And it serves the world to tell the truth about my uniqueness. And when I do that, the world rewards me. The world at large, the big world, the esoteric world, is there specifically as a witness for that truth. And when I hold that truth back, then I don't get the perks that the universe is here to give me. And so at one point I realized, I'm doing all this amazing stuff. We all do. All of us have an amazing story. I have an amazing story. So when I'm thinking about my story, I'm thinking about the things that I'm up to, that I'm doing, the things that I've discovered, the things that are happening, things I have patents on. The uniqueness of my approach with healing and sound, that I deserve to tell the world what I'm up to, if it can make a change. And I realized that, nobody really knows what I'm up to. I've got some stuff on my website. It doesn't tell the story at all. It's skimming the surface. It's not telling what's here, what's inside of me, what's my uniqueness that I need to tell the world before I kick off. And so I realized that the only people who really understood any depth of what I'm up to are the people who have to pay and come to my workshop. Those are the only people who know what I'm doing. People who have to, pay a ticket and go through the turnstile to my life. And I thought, what's wrong with this picture? And so that's where all this began. Why I'm here talking to you now, and why I've been here for a year, for an hour every week, telling my story and telling what I think about things. And I encourage everyone who's been watching this broadcast to do the same. There's an amazing feedback from the universe that happens when you participate with the universe in this way, where you, in a bold and courageous manner, in an unafraid way, speak your truth to the universe. And if you happen to be wrong, so be it. It's good to get that feedback to find, oh, I didn't look at it that way. And now, something shifts. And when that shifts and I get more aligned with the rightness in my own understanding, then I get closer to my place of ease. And the dis-ease begins to dissolve just because I'm sharing myself as a lover with the universe at large, with the Godhead, who I am in love with, who is me. It's like this narcissistic trip, right? But be that as it may, I do want to discuss some of the things that I've seen in 40 years of practice and where that practice has led me, and the amazing sort of things I've seen and the kind of practice that got attracted to me because of who I am and what my talents are. If you're good at something, the universe throws more of that at you. And the more you do that, the better you get at it. So that's kind of how a practice works. So when we go back to today, which is Easter, and I'm not going to talk about Christ rising, from the tomb or any of that, because those are old esoteric stories that are shared from traditions of many, many, many cultures all over the earth. It's not a unique story to Jesus or Christ rising from the tomb. It's an ancient story going all the way before the Egyptians. It's possible that Christianity, grabbed that story like it has done with so many other things, particularly pagan religions, and replaced them with a Christian story. It took a pagan story and pasted Jesus' face on top of the ancient face and restructured it to be a Jesus story instead of a pagan story or an ancient story. In honor of the deeper esoteric meaning of Easter, I have lit the three candles on the candelabra behind me back here on my grand piano there. That's, by the way, that piano was Louise Hay's piano. And someday I will tell you that story about how I ended up with Louise Hay's piano, and how we met and how we fell in love and how we became a couple. But be that as it may, that is the candelabra that I bought for Louise one Christmas because her grand piano had no candelabra, and a grand piano has to have a candelabra, right? But the three candles of the candelabra is the symbol of many esoteric traditions. In the Christian tradition, it's the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost. It's the positive and the negative and the neutral in physics. It's how the wiring in your walls work, right? You have a positive and a negative lead and a ground. Positive, negative, and neutral. You have the same thing in the structure of the atom, which forms compounds that your body is made of. Proton, electron, neutron. Positive, negative, neutral. And it goes on and on like that. We have, mind, heart, and physical body, and the Holy Ghost, the spirit of consciousness itself. But back to what I want to cover, related, because this is a Christian Jesus Day, Jesus Christ as healer, and the miracles of the healing that took place. There are many instances in the New Testament where Jesus confronted someone with severe illness or blindness, and did some form of energy healing, and they were immediately cured. All of us in the Christian tradition are familiar with these stories, including the most radical one, which is raising Lazarus from the dead itself. But the one story of the blind man where he puts mud in his eyes, and or other ones where he's done some laying of hands and afterwards they're miraculously healed, or the blind can see, or whatever it is. When they confront him afterwards and thank him for healing them, he always has the same thing to say to each and every one of them. And that's somewhere along the lines of, it is not I who have healed you, it is your faith that has healed you. And this gets pretty close to the idea of what we've talked about before with the spontaneous remission. The idea that an experience that is so powerful that it teleports me to the real core depth of my soul, crashes through all the barriers of my cages that protect me at the deep level. And I get in contact with something so powerful that something in my spirit stands up, arises, and says, no, I don't think so. I don't think I'm going to be the guy who dies of cancer in this story. That's not going to happen for me. And whammo, that becomes so. And the cancer disappears. And this is, as we've discussed, a deep quantum effect, because from the quantum physics rules of the universe under the hood, where out here it seems like it's Newtonian rules that rule the universe, the Newtonian physics, but past the periodic table, which I had called the wall before. On the other side of the periodic table, we don't have atoms anymore. We just have protons, electrons, and neutrons, and what they're made of, and what those are made of, and what those are made of. And that seems to be very different rules than the rules that seem to govern what's familiar to us out here. So for the rules out here, this is solid and it's an objective thing, and so is the universe. And it's an impossibility to understand how something like a cancer tumor that is about to kill me can just disappear. And disappear in an instant. And leave no trace that it was ever there. And that's a quantum effect. And that means that this is a quantum effect that's exhibiting itself in the macro world, which scientists have been struggling with now for decades to explain. That how come these weird laws in the quantum world, where time flows forwards and backwards at the same time, and things are linked together across the universe with spooky action at a distance, synchronized up together, and how reality itself is not solid but has no more substance than an expectation or an idea. Schrodinger's cat paradox, the cat is both living and dead until somebody comes to witness. Those kind of bizarre effects under the hood in a quantum world would make the idea of a cancer coming and going just regular business, like Schrodinger's cat. What it means is that this macro world is exhibiting a new element of laws that most likely work in a quantum field, but nobody has written or discovered yet. But we should be looking. And that is the fact that once the closed box with the cat and the cyanide inside, when the lid comes off, is the only time that the cat, the living/dead cat, becomes one of those two, when consciousness arrives on the scene to witness. Once consciousness arrives on the scene to witness, then the cat materializes as one of those two possibilities. I had talked about this being a coin, where the coin is in the process of floating, spinning around. We flipped it, but now it's just caught, floating in a non-time space. until consciousness arrives on the scene. And when I arrive on the scene, gravity appears and it drops down and it becomes heads or tails. The universe materializes around me with all of its laws and all of its rules, moment by moment by moment, because that's what I'm expecting to happen. So the once that coin has dropped and it's either heads or tails, that's that. We now have a world with a coin that dropped and made tails. Or we have a world where I lifted the lid and the cat was dead. We don't have any evidence in quantum physics that that's reversible, that the dead cat could somehow go backwards and turn back into the living/dead cat again, or that the coin could fly off the table back up into air and start spinning, so that we could make another choice. And that seems to be the case that's happening with spontaneous remission, that the coin has stopped its flipping and it's dropped, and tails came up and I have cancer and I'm going to die. And all of a sudden something happens that makes that cancer reverse itself back up into the flipping coin. And then I choose it to be the other one. I choose the different universe. I choose the parallel corridor. And that's the one that I decide I want to have instead. This is a phenomenon that if we're seeing it exhibit here in this world, we know that it's an underpinning law in the quantum physics world, but nobody's been thinking about this. Nobody's seen that connection. And nobody's looking for that kind of connection in the quantum field. Sometimes, unless you stumble on it by accident, you would never see it. You'd never discover it unless you were looking for it. And as soon as you start looking for it, then it begins to appear for you. It's the same thing. It's like if I start looking for it, then that coin appears, spinning. So back to here, where this guy who is blind, who all of a sudden can see, and starts to praise Jesus for healing him. And Jesus says, it wasn't I, it was you. You healed yourself through your faith. Faith in this standpoint is this person's faith that Jesus was this all-powerful being who had a huge worldwide or a huge regional reputation for being able to do miracle healings. And you believed it so fiercely that you made your way to him somehow to try to present yourself in his presence, so that if he looked upon you and did a healing for you, you knew absolutely that you were going to get cured, healed. This means that now we're once again still working on the idea of the placebo effect. I wish we could throw that word away, but let's repurpose placebo to mean placebo with a capital P, a cosmic placebo, the power of belief itself to make the whole world, to make everything. This idea that the placebo could stand for my expectation of what's going to happen. Now we align right with the quantum field work of the Schrodinger cat paradox and the flipping coin. So that means that this person's belief in the fact that Jesus was a great healer and could heal him, and all he needed to be was in his presence, was enough to make that healing take place. Now we're beyond the statistics that we normally see here in the macro Newtonian world, where we know that statistically the placebo effect is a 35% effect. 35% of the people in a double-blind study, this group is given the drug and this group is given the sugar pill, and these people believe they were given the drug, so they have a drug-like response. 35% of them will have a drug-like response because they believe they're going to have that. The brain manufactures those neurochemicals and does what's ever necessary to make that happen. What this seems to be indicating is, and remember, these are people with, doctors with lab coats in a research study. I mean, there's nothing special about them except the fact that people believe what the pharmaceutical companies tell them, that this pill does this for you. And all this other horrible stuff too, the quote side effects. But it does do this. So if I believe it does that, that means that 35% of the drug response is a placebo response itself and not the drug. And that's the hidden statistic in double-blind studies, that if the FDA says we'll approve your drug if you can show us a 67% response, knowing that 35% of the sugar pill group is going to be placebo. What nobody seems to understand is that 35% of the drug group is also placebo. So when you tally it all up, the group A is 35%, group B is 35% placebo, and the drug group, the 63%, 35% of that 63% was placebo. So really the majority of the response in the whole study was placebo, and the minority was the drug itself. The power of the mind to heal, the power of the soul, and its belief to make reality so. Very powerful indeed. So if we had a Christ-like figure who had a worldwide reputation for miracle healings, the kind of which would blow anybody's mind if they saw it, of any kind of condition, no matter what it is, and you made your way to this person because you knew that you would get healed if you could just get within their presence, that means that now you are expanding that 35% placebo response to 100%, because the 35% is based on something that we're ambivalent about. Some guy in a white lab coat. I mean, that doesn't inspire the Jesus level of believing. If we could inspire the Jesus level of believing that something is going to be so, it starts to expand that 35% from the ordinary statistical to the extraordinary of reality that we experience on a moment-by-moment basis. I am so convinced that this is real, that what's behind me is real. Those objects have physical reality. My body has physical reality. My disease has physical reality. I believe that so core and deeply that I expand that placebo response to 100%. That means that my cancer itself is a placebo response. It's me believing so deeply that this is what's real. This becomes Jesus for me. And until I can break the illusion of that and arrive at something deeper and more powerful by the cancer itself, and that the fear of dying, that fear is enough as an emotion to break me out of my cage at a core level. And something inside escapes out and says, no, I don't think so. Let's change this dialogue. And the belief system shifts into a new realm, and now that becomes what's so. Me with no cancer, like that. And it's that idea extended out to all of us in our subterranean sort of collective unconscious network that we're attempting to create here with the mind link, brain entrainment, and synchronizing of the hemispheres, and a running dialogue that we're having to try to flesh out the idea that we're all grappling with, which is, what does a utopia look like? What kind of world would we have if we could have whatever it is our hearts desire? And then we realize we have no idea what our heart desires because we've never really fleshed that out. And that's a shocker in itself. Never really fleshed out. What is it do I want? God comes to me and says, you can have anything you want. What do you want? And you go, damn, I never really thought about that before. I don't want to be poor anymore. Nope, that's not it. That's not it. I don't want to be alone anymore. Nope, that's not it. That's not how it works. I don't want to be sick anymore. No, that's not how it works. You have to visualize. You have to come up with a vision of pure health, as if you didn't know what disease was, as pure love, as if you didn't know what being alone was. That kind of idea is what we're trying to flesh out under the hood in a non-verbal, non-thinking way, over time distilling a plan of action for each one of us. What is it that you want in the world, in this world? And the kahunas have the best idea I've seen, that God grants all prayers, therefore what I'm experiencing right now is what I've prayed for in the past. And prayer happens before a thought. Prayer is the state I'm talking about that you try to get to, a state of expectation. This is what I'm expecting the next moment to be, a world of utopian perfection. And I can't define it except as an emotion. This is what it would feel like to be in that kind of world, where everything was perfect, where I was perfectly healthy, where I was perfectly abundant, where I was surrounded with perfect love. What heaven on earth would fleshed out look like for me to experience as an experience. That's as far as I actually need to go. All I need to go is to find that emotional state, pull it forth. And if that's my prayer, then the universe's job becomes simple. It doesn't have to flesh out the universe according to a script of what the mountains are going to look like and what the cities are going to look like and what the people are going to look like when they interact with each other. The universe can solve the problem of getting me to feel this way in an infinite number of ways. And whichever way it chooses is going to be just fine with me as long as I get what this sensation is. Sensation of utopian peace and no more dis-ease. So, when your ticket is punched, there's nothing you can do except take the train. And having your ticket punched doesn't necessarily mean that the Grim Reaper has come to punch your ticket and take you away. It means that when your ticket gets punched, the universe itself is knocking on your forehead and saying, this is what you should be doing now. When we become sensitive to where the universe is opening the doors for us and where the doors are being slammed on our face. Obviously, the ones that are being slammed on our face is where we are taking the duty of trying to make something happen that is not aligned with what the universe has in store for us anyway. So then we have nothing but strife and headache and bloody noses from doors slamming in our face. And we should take that as an indication of, I don't think that's the path for me. I'll start looking around to find out, is there a door that seems to be open? Is there something that seems to be beckoning to me? And the sooner that I can follow those open doors and turn away from the closing doors, the smoother my life becomes, and the faster I start to zoom along the path for the betterment of my soul and for everyone I know and for the world in general, towards some kind of concept of true healing, true lack of dis-ease at a cosmic scale, where I'm right with the world, I'm right with the cosmos, I'm right with God. Whatever you can conceive of as what the big word means, the God word. I sort of dislike using the word because it seems to make it too small. It's not, it screws up the concept of what God actually means as a word, which is something that could never be put into a word. Something that's so gigantic and so big and so immense, so universal and so infinite that my mind reels, and all it can do is express itself as an emotion of awe, where you have no place even to know what this emotion is. It's bigger than what you can encompass, even with your heart, to try to explain to yourself, what is this emotion I'm feeling? But at the core of it is what I've said before, is this place of peace and safety, a place of alignment and balance and harmony, joy, love, all of the good stuff, where I have everything I need. So I have perfect abundance. I am in love with everything, including myself. And I am in a perfect state of health, which means I'm in a perfect state of ease, of safety. I found my place home. That's what we're essentially all looking for, someplace inside. We're attempting to get this through jobs, acquiring of money, insurance policies, boyfriends, girlfriends, sex, food. We're trying to get it in all kinds of different ways, and those are all not the right ways. And when we can't find that and we end up in this state of dis-ease, we sooner or later begin our search, the heroic journey of trying to find health, my health. I get my health back, to get my place. Nobody has the time or the money to get sick. So we put it off and we put it off and we put it off until we can't ignore the symptoms anymore. And then we start looking. And then we end up on this heroic journey to try to find our health. And we visit many doctors and spend a lot of money. And we start to find out that the people we go to really don't have a clue what they're doing. They're give you a pill and that doesn't seem to do the job, so they say, well, let's try this pill, or let's try this, or let's do this surgery. Or pretty soon you have to realize, wait a second, these guys don't know what they're doing. They're like throwing spaghetti at the wall. That's not very comforting. And usually you begin going down the esoteric path of health, holistic health. You're trying to find people who have an ability to make a deeper connection with you as a holistic being, and not as a symptom. You know, I say when a pickpocket dies, all he sees is God's pockets. You go to a kidney specialist, and what they're going to see is your kidneys. You go to a surgeon who wants to do surgery. So entering into the epic journey of finding your health and exploring many avenues and pathways is in itself a spiritual journey. Because there's another thing about all of us. Nobody wants to ask for help. It's easier to offer help than to accept help, or to ask for help. So until we realize that way down underneath all of it, the healing comes from no place but inside of me. My internal physician program is the only place where any health will come from. Some place inside of me, a sort of divine, infinite, universal intelligence that knows how to grow a body out of 2 cells and differentiate the tissues into everything that I am and make it all function automatically without me thinking about it. That's the core healing principle that exhibits itself in my body. And when that principle is not working, when I am in a state of dis-ease, it means that I've lost the ease at the core of myself. I'm disturbed at my core, and that's exhibiting itself as symptoms throughout my body. And the symptoms are going to show in the areas of my body that are my weak points genetically. So for one person it's their thyroid, another person it's their gut, but underlying it's the same condition. I'm, getting in touch with a place in myself where I know that healing takes place, where the energy fields, if I can just get the kind of help I need to remove the blockages from the sort of cosmic energy fields that I'm connected with at the deep part of my being, allow them to be free to work again instead of being blocked for some reason, or a series of blocks, then that means that the doctor I go to, if they're worth their salt, knows that they're not the doctor, that they're the physician's assistant, and the physician is this part inside of you that knows how to grow your body out of 2 cells, and that this rational thinking part is the patient. This is the part that does the search, makes a phone call, looks at my bank account, drives to the doctor's office and presents myself. This part. And the doctor I end up with realizes that they're not the doctor. They're the assistant to the big doctor. And their job is to figure out where's the blockages and remove those one at a time and allow this life force to express itself again and wake up the internal physician program. Now, of course, we've got unbelievably sophisticated 21st century tools at our disposal to look at the physical body interface that is the expression of the quantum field essence that's forming what appears to be physicality. But in reality, we know that this is not solid. This is compounds, and compounds are made of atoms, and atoms are particles, and particles are made of smaller particles, and the smallest particle has nothing inside of it except energy pattern relationships in a standing wave. It's all vibrational energy standing waves nested together so tightly that we have a quantum pixelated hyperdimensional movie that we're in. And so whatever happens in the spirit field is reflected in metaphor in the harmonic bodies that appear to be solid. My physical body, my emotions, my mind are the harmonics of the fundamental tone of my soul, so to speak. And when that becomes disturbed and untuned, it messes up all the harmonics and they become agitated, and I've lost my ease again. And so that means by analyzing the physical body and what's going on in it, I can gain a window into what's taking place in the disturbances of my soul. So that's the value that I see in aligning myself with high-tech imaging devices, like in this case, brain mapping computers that can show not only what brain frequencies are happening, but where they're happening in the cortex on a computer screen. This is the kind of thing that you see in QEEG practice. Neurofeedback is based on that. I did 2 years of work with neurofeedback where I was able to see these kind of images for a 2-year period with many, many patients and many kind of conditions. It was a great learning exercise for me to have this kind of equipment at my disposal. And you have these caps of EEG electrodes that each one of these is catching brain activity under this region. And then that's extrapolated through computer program algorithms into topographical maps of where brain activity is taking place. Here we have delta brain activity happening in the occipital right parietal lobe into the central channel. But each one of these we're seeing different kind of brain activity and where it's happening in the brain. And remember that these kind of images are live, so they're moving. So these topographical maps are kind of undulating around as the brain activity is constantly kind of shifting a little bit and moving. We can also get detailed readouts of connectivity of different parts of the brain, where the connectivity between this part of the cortex and that part of the cortex, that pathway, this pathway, these extremely complex pathways, we can see what happens with something like brainwave entrainment with headphones, where we've got one tone on one side and one tone on the other side, creating a sort of coherent pattern of synchronizing of these pathways in the cortex, where that's something that is actually a problem with certain types of conditions where we have non-communication pathways that should be communicating that are not communicating, and this kind of software can show us which pathways are not working. It's unimaginably complex in a three-dimensional field. But for me, it meant that if I see a pathway that's not communicating, this pathway here, then I can rotate my binaural beats in three-dimensional space and put one tone here on this node and one tone here on this node and cause this pathway to light up. And I can do that with stacking binaural beats together that are related in 3D to all kinds of different pathways, and have all these pathways light up in 3 dimensions based on a sort of a Star Trek version of brain entrainment using binaural beats that nobody else in the world is even thinking of doing. It's another one of those opportunities that the universe presented to me because I had, either the dumbness or the courage to step on my path and have the universe open the doors and make things happen. And then because I made the one decision, the universe was able to open these doors for me so that I could see this and have opportunities for this, which I never could have gotten on my own. I couldn't have banged on enough doors or made enough phone calls to reach the right person to make this opportunity happen for me. It could only come from me making a right decision that the universe now opens the doors for me to happen. The understanding we currently have of the brain is just jumping by leaps and bounds on a weekly basis. We're really beginning to understand more and more precisely where in the cortex specific events take place and which parts of the cortex are in charge of various types of factors, which means that with binaural beats, I can place the perceived beat. Remember, if we have one headphone here and one headphone here, 100 hertz and 105, I'll hear a 5 cycle a second pulsing right here. But if I make this ear a little louder, then this perceived pulse will shift over to the right, and it will now be here. If I make this louder still, it will shift further to the right and be here. So I can move the perceived binaural beat back and forth and align it with different brain centers and stimulate those centers. And with 3D processing, I can move this sound to any place in three-dimensional space I want. That means that I can move the binaural beats to any quadrant, and I can enhance the functions of that area of the cortex at will. This is advanced 21st century sound healing Star Trek. I've done extensive work with EEG, neurofeedback, my own EEG equipment, exploring this idea of binaural beats and brain entrainment and 3D positioning and multiple levels of binaural beats that form a brain overall pattern. I think I discussed once before the idea of the awakened mind pattern, the pattern showing up in enlightenment so many times, 15 different levels of brain activity synchronized between the right and left hemispheres. We have heart rate variability, which is another extremely sophisticated monitor, a world-class gold standard in medicine because of its predictability for disease and heart attack, its ability to analyze your current state of health very precisely and make accurate predictions about your mortality if you don't do anything. My heart rate variability that I have a patent on is a real-time system, not a snapshot. And heart rate variability takes the measurement between each heartbeat in the electrical activity of the heart in microseconds and adds them all together. It takes 190 heartbeats, adds them all together, divides by 190, and you end up with the mean space between a heartbeat. And every succeeding heartbeat is measured against this mean. And all of that is combined with a fast Fourier transform mathematics and generates these graphs which show the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system live. This is the standard HRV screen, sympathetic, parasympathetic, exotic factors like hormones and baroreceptors and subconscious ruminations. All of these screens give me a lot of information about what's happening under the hood in your body. And this right here is the zero stress place, my place of safety, my place of the absence of dis-ease. This is the prerequisite for healing. You have to be able to push in the clutch of the autonomic nervous system that controls all systems, put it into a zero stress safe place, a prerequisite for healing. Because at this point, energy comes back to my reservoir in my body, and I use that energy to work on my maintenance list to repair and rebalance my systems. And so this is the biotuning thing that I do. This is how I determine what sound frequencies to use. Because when it is not that, when you lay down on your back, this should happen within 3 minutes. If it doesn't, if you're stuck in this fight or flight response and you don't get this, then you're burning up all your resources and you can never reach your program to create the healing program and make it run. And so my innovation is to expose you to various sound frequencies until I find one that makes this happen and microtune it to a 1 cent accuracy, a couple of decimal points. When I play that tone, this happens. When I expose you to the tone in a treatment for 30 minutes, this happens, where the sympathetic and parasympathetic start to skate back and forth across this balance point in a new emerging rhythm in the autonomic nervous system. This is the homeostasis state, where the system is working on its systems and repairing them. Combining that with this idea of binaural beats, 100 and 104 equals a 4 hertz frequency that we hear. A phantom pulse causes the pathways between the right and left hemispheres to synchronize up. It forces the brain to fire signals down those pathways. And that is precisely what's wrong with a number of different types of conditions that I have seen in 40 years of practice, particularly neurological conditions, which I have become a specialist in worldwide. I have people fly in all over the world. ADD, ADHD, dyslexia, autism, epilepsy, concussion, PTSD, depression, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, all kinds of these different conditions have certain things that are in common. For instance, autism and ADD and ADHD and dyslexia and concussion and PTSD all have something in common. Disruption of pathways of communication within a hemisphere and between the hemispheres. And we know that we can use brain entrainment to fix that. We know that if you've had a concussion and you've got all these concussion symptoms, confusion, memory loss, in some cases depression, sort of out of it, that we have pathway communication disruption. And if we use headphones with binaural beats, we force the hemispheres to synchronize back up again and fire signals down the pathways that aren't working, which is why you've got this condition. So we can fix that by retraining your brain. A similar thing with autism. We have non-communication of the pathways. ADD and ADHD, non-communication of the pathways. ADD is stuck in theta. We can't get to beta, where we have to externally focus. We can't externally focus because beta doesn't work. We're stuck in daydream mode. Daydream mode in theta. Let me go back to this. We're stuck in theta. We can't exhibit beta activity. So we can entrain from theta up into beta with binaural beats and fix that problem. PTSD has concussion. as part of its symptom picture. So part of the treatment for PTSD is to reestablish communication pathways and to turn the autonomic nervous system back to zero, because it has been firmly stuck in this fight or flight response that it can't get out of because of the experiences of war. So taking different frequencies in the right-left ears forces this coherent synchronicity and lighting up of various pathways throughout the cortex. And that's precisely what's wrong with many of these conditions. Epilepsy in particular, where the communication pathways between the right-left hemispheres are so profoundly disturbed and missing that the brain continually attempts to fix that and works itself up into a brainstorm trying. The brainstorm is the epileptic seizure. The brain constantly trying to get this communication to work again and works itself back up into a seizure is what that's all about. And so all of a sudden now, brainwave entrainment with binaural beats with headphones becomes all important, because that now breaks that vicious cycle and forces the hemispheres to realign, and all these electrical activities light up all those pathways precisely and exactly what is wrong with you. And if we can do that on a daily basis with headphones, and every time you do that, these light up. The more they light up, the stronger they get to light up, and pretty soon we have highways paved, and we have no more seizures. It's not there anymore. It's gone. The seizures were the body's attempt to try to fix something. It's not a disease. Is not something that lands from Venus and invades you. It's something that comes and arises from in you. Your body is attempting to rectify a problem. That's what these symptoms are. So now we can go back with ADD and ADHD, and we can use this brain mapping computer system to find out which pathways are not working and align our binaural beats on specific pathways and force them to work. And conditions like autism have very specific things that are going on with them. Autism has not only this non-communication thing going on and within a hemisphere going on, but it also has deficiencies in certain types of brain activity. Like ADD and ADHD has deficiencies in beta, external focus, stuck in theta. Autism is got a neurological developmental problem where certain brain frequencies didn't form or formed incompletely, like mu is a famous form for autism. Mu brain activity has got to do with what's called mirror neurons. Another one is gamma. Gamma brain activity at around 40 hertz, where that's called the binding frequency. It's a sensory motor sort of thing, where gamma brain activity binds all of the sensory information from my five senses and binds them up in one place. Gamma aligns with theta brain activity, modulates it, and lifts all that information right out of the brain into a brain cloud, internet for the brain, binds all the sensory information together so it makes sense out here in the world. If it's deficient, what I see and taste and touch and smell and hear don't align with each other. They're not synchronized up, so they seem to be all separate entities bombarding me with information, and I'll end up like this, you know. It's an onslaught of information. Severe form is schizophrenia, where the right-left hemispheres are completely separated from each other. So the normal little voice dialogue I've got in my brain now appears to be voices I'm hearing from somewhere else. And the little movies I play in my mind when I remember something or imagine something become hallucinations that don't seem to be coming from me. The default mode network is another huge one. This gamma and default mode network is the absolute cutting edge of neuroscience. But in normal neuroscience, it's just observation of what they find there. Nobody's using it in a practical manner to come up with a treatment plan that might fix it. Pharmaceutical companies are in charge. They're attempting to come up with a pill that will alleviate the symptoms of it without actually fixing why it's there. So in the default mode network, we have these 4 brain regions. I've covered this in a whole live stream. Frontal, occipital to parietal areas. My sense of self on the inside of my skin, my sense of self on the outside of my skin, a sense of time from the past to the present, and present into the future. And if these become unsynchronized, all kinds of conditions start to happen. All the ones I mentioned before: ADD, ADHD, dyslexia, autism, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, depression, PTSD. All of those have the default mode network unsynchronized as some portion of its symptom picture. And so when I treat those conditions, everyone gets the default mode network entrainment to resynchronize those. Resynchronize gamma. It becomes important, and we can entrain that mu brain frequency back. Mu is the mirror neuron thing that happens when you're an infant, where I see your body moving, I see your face moving. The areas of my brain that would make me do that light up, but it doesn't shift to the motor cortex to actually make my face do that. I'm learning what it means, what a facial expression means. I'm learning what body language means. I'm learning socialization skills, which tend to be missing in the high end of the autism spectrum. Therefore, we should re-entrain the mu function in the brain, get the socialization skills back, retrain the gamma, retrain the default mode network so my sense of self becomes coherent again. This is the ways that we're using sound and brain entrainment in a scientific way, in a clinical way, for predictable outcomes. This is Wikipedia describing mu brain activity, the sensory motor mu rhythm, which all has to do with what's down here called mirror neurons, where it's monkey see, monkey do. Under the hood, my brain is watching your activities and learning from that. And if mu is missing, or if mu is deficient, I can't learn socialization skills, and I seem to be weird. I don't look at you in the eyes because I don't recognize your eyes are anything important to be looked at. I might look right through your body because I can't distinguish that your body is something separate than the light switch on the wall, until I can sort of train that back. This is the sensory motor cortex, this area here called the precentral gyrus. The gyrus is the noodles, and the sulcus is the groove, the canyon. So this is the prefrontal noodle and the post-central noodle. This canyon here is called the central sulcus. It's the one that divides the brain in half, this way to this way. And this big noodle at the front is where sensory motor information happens. I receive information from all my body parts. And this is where I send signals back out to the body, the motor cortex. And this is where mu activity takes place. And this is exactly what's missing in autistic kids, or deficient. And that's pretty much, this particular article is looking at different specific brain patterns that are deficient in autistic kids. This one is finally, after all these years, recognizing that gamma is associated with autism. I began using gamma with autism back in the early 90s, and produced my first brain entrainment CD in gamma 1995, 96. Dalai Lama did his first research project at the University of Wisconsin in 2000, 2001, and that's where they discovered that gamma activity was huge in these monks that have been meditating for 30 years. Now we see that there's a gut-brain link to autism. through the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve governs the parasympathetic part of the autonomic nervous system, and stimulation of the origin of the vagus nerve at the center organelle inside the hypothalamus, where it arises, the absolute control center for parasympathetic, the anterior hypothalamic nucleus, is what I'm influencing with precisely tuned sound frequencies, sort of like a wine glass. And then it snakes out of the brainstem as a nerve, and that's called the vagus nerve. And now there's a big thing with vagus nerve stimulation as a way of healing a lot of different kind of conditions. Excuse me, I've been doing it now for 40 years. But this idea of a brain-gut link, vagus nerve supplies the gut, and it monitors the gut, and the biome communicates with the brain through the vagus nerve. That leads us back to this guy, Andrew Wakefield, the gastroenterologist that wrote the first research report with a dozen colleagues, that because he was seeing a connection between gastroenteritis, gastric gut conditions, and vaccines. That vaccines were somehow disturbing the gut, and that was leading to all kinds of conditions. And one of those conditions appeared to be autism, because autistic kids mostly tend to also have a gastric kind of a gut response, a problem with their gut. And as a gastroenterologist, he was questioning in one sentence at the end of his report, perhaps we should look into a possible connection between these gastric conditions with autism and vaccines, because vaccines tend to be causing these gut responses, and many of these gut responses have autism. Maybe there's some link there. And that got him completely crucified and lost his license, and his article was kicked out of the medical journal and on, and he was sort of demonized. But most people don't realize that he was exonerated. Lancet, which was the medical journal, acknowledges that Dr. Wakefield's work was exonerated, but they still refused to retract their banning of him, of his article. Stodgy, AMA-controlled, pharmaceutical-controlled, biggest publication of modern medicine. But now, we're full circle. We see this now in article after article, that the gut connection with autism is absolutely there. So he was right all along. Autism and all these other kind of conditions, they all have underlying neurological problems that are the same. And all of those tend to respond to the same kind of treatment of this synchronizing and burning the pathways and returning the autonomic nervous system zero. For instance, if the autonomic nervous system is running this fight or flight response all the time, and I've abandoned my maintenance list, my body starts burning up all of its resources, and my gut doesn't work properly because the resources have been removed from that into my muscle to fight for my life. My gut, my elimination system, my immune system, all of that. Those mean that under the hood, there's really sort of just one condition. That's why I think stress is the ultimate cause of disease. That if my immune system is offline, it begins to falter in what it thinks it's supposed to be doing. It may even start attacking me. And if it starts attacking my own tissues, an autoimmune disease emerges. And now it's a matter of which of my tissues are the weak link in my own genetic chain, which will get attacked first. So if this person is their thyroid, they have Hashimoto's thyroiditis. This person over here is their gut, they have Crohn's disease. And even though they've got two separate names, they're the same condition under the hood, the immune system is screwed up. And why? Because it's offline, because the fight or flight response is stuck, rolling all the time. So really the problem is the autonomic nervous system. And who controls the autonomic nervous system is the parasympathetic nervous system that has its origin in the anterior nucleus of the hypothalamus that eventually becomes the vagus nerve. So underlying all of these issues is, us being able to find a pathway to return our place of ease deep in ourselves. And some of this is emotional, and some of it is mental, some of it is spiritual, some of it is physical. All of these align to the same plot, the same spot in me, in my place of losing my sense of ease, dis-ease, and finding it again through the journey that we all end up on sooner or later. A place where we find that the healing can only come from deep within myself. I have to find who can help me to remove the blockages from finding that spot again. And it's part of what these sound tracks are all about, is to use entrainment and 3D processing and mind links to align all of us together. Because when we do that, when we're in that space, this mind link space, my own personal issues have now got linked into a pool of energy on another plane that is a vast pool of energy, an ocean of energy that I would never have access to on my own for my own healing. So for this time, this mind link, it would be good for all of us to open ourselves up to feel the energy field of each other and freely allow anyone who needs it to dip into that pool and pull more energy into your own field than you could possibly have on your own to enhance your own healing. We can use each other as a resource for that. We can share that energy pool with each other for anyone who needs the healing. All of us are sort of a tribe and family who are here for each other. And it's that kind of idea that we need to expand anyway into the world at large as we heal the human species psyche on planet Earth. So with that being said, we use our headphones here. And we're all in this together. And so let's share with one another to help each other out. Because when we do, it helps us out as well. We're all in this world together, so the more happy the world gets for each person involved, the better it gets for everyone. So, eyes closed, and here we go.